Hello and welcome back, and that is right, today I want to talk about a NAS that frankly I'm quite familiar with. This is the LinkStation N2, or the LinkStation N1 refresh, depending on when you're watching this. This is the new Link Plus Flash NAS system. Does it sound familiar? Well, that's because of this. Last year I made a video about one of my favourite flash devices of 2024. This was a 4M.2 NVMe and 2 SATA SSD system there. It arrived with an Intel CPU with integrated graphics. It arrived on crowdfunding at around 300 to 400 nickel, and although it wasn't the perfect flash system, when it did eventually end crowdfunding and onto traditional retail for the better part of half a year, it's still done very well. It arrives with Unraid, it arrives with that nice efficient CPU, it's got the flash storage, 4M.2 NVMe's as mentioned, a couple of SATAs there. It was good enough, but the brand itself has differentiated into several NAS systems. Indeed, I'm currently testing this and the LinkStation S1, a video that may or may not already be live, another NAS going to crowdfunding. But this video is about the N2. This, arriving on crowdfunding very, very soon, is the refresh and upgrade of that predecessor. The N2 arriving with a newer CPU, arriving with 10 GBE on board, has answered a lot of people's criticisms. It also arrives with an improved metal panel there on the base for cooling and better passive fan control there at the base. Now, let's talk a little bit about this. Well, this system, again, the reason it was popular is it was a very compact, stylish looking flash NAS. It's all NAS that you would be happy to have in your local office environment and not tucked away on a shelf somewhere. But a lot of users were slightly apprehensive the first time around because of that crowdfunding. Now, again, crowdfunding is not the same as traditional retail, and no one should ever disguise it as such, and they don't. Crowdfunding, you are backing an idea, you are backing a prototype product. Indeed, this is a prototype, and most users that aren't happy with the risks associated will almost certainly go for traditional retail. Indeed, the predecessor, when it did go to crowdfunding, didn't get as popular as it did when it went to traditional retail, so do keep that in mind. This, they haven't gave me a confirmed price, but they have said it is going to be comparable in price to the N1. So again, that is going to be around 300 to 400 nickel, factoring in the tax, factoring in early bird deals that will no doubt come to crowdfunding websites like Kickstarter, so do keep that in mind. And again, if it is already live, I'll put a link in the description for you. Now, just like its previous version, the SATA SSDs there arrive via two injected click and capture 2.5 inch adapters there. They go straight in. You can run the device on a single drive if you choose. There's also a USB Type-C 10 gig connection there in the middle and multiple LEDs when the system's in operation, as well as a nice kind of neon light system status already visible there when it's in operation. Now, on the base of the operation, we have 4 M.2 NVMe drives there. We've got 4 of them. Let's get that open without breaking my nails. Those thermal pads were really doing their sticky job there. Removing that panel, we've got the 2 M.2 NVMe's in each of them. It arrives with the thermal pads as well, and I've got it installed inside there. It's nice and straightforward, and again, all 4 drives were immediately picked up internally. None of them mucking around in BIOS. It was good to go straight out the gate. Also, again, as mentioned, they've improved the base panel of this device over its predecessor there. So notwithstanding an improvement of the material being used, but also there's the fan and additional vent there to aid some of that passive and active airflow combination that was critiqued in the original N1. Now, noise when the system was in operation was virtually inaudible. I really had to hammer this device across all of those drives to get the fan to ramp up in a meaningful way. Although there is no physical fan controls here, we also have to highlight the fact that because they don't develop the software in-house like some brands, they are utilising Unraid, which has its own pros and cons when you have a third-party and first-party hardware-software relationship. I will say you do need to add some add-ons there in the Unraid software currently in order to manage a lot of the fans and temp operations internally. They've certainly tweaked it, and they have said during their crowdfunding that this prototype will have some of those improvements over time in conjunction with the software and further testing. But I will say that at least the power consumption was very low. The N100 CPU that this system arrived with there resulted in, when the CPU was at around 0 to 10% utilization with the odd spike, because again, this is an early prototype where they're ironing that out, was around 10 to 13 watts. And when the system was in more than half use, so around 50 to 75% utilization at CPU level, and all of the drives being accessed, it only went up to about 18 to 22 watts. Again, a large part thanks to that CPU. So power consumption on this is pretty darn modest. I will highlight though, just like its predecessor, the 60 watt PSU, although it is a nice quality PSU, I wish it was USB Type-C. We're seeing 65 watt USB-C inputs, and the idea of having a barrel adapter here when USB-C should really become the standard. Given its scale, I'm kind of disappointed this isn't USB-C. I wish that was something they would address. I know it was a comment a lot of people raised in the previous crowdfunding, but I guess maybe it's a production line thing, but maybe in future, maybe look at USB-C. Link Plus, we'll find out. Now that CPU, the N100, is a CPU we know very well. It's got a low 0.8 to 1 gigahertz base level clock speed that can be ramped up to 3.4 gigahertz when it's needed. It's a quad-core 4-thread processor. The TDP is surprisingly low at just 6 watts there for that reported TDP. Now the integrated graphics, pretty middling, I'd say. They're not terrible, but they're not out of this world at 0.7 gigahertz their base. The integrated graphics are still pretty good. They're going to be great for things like Plex. We've run Plex and tested N100 on several different occasions, and it's been pretty darn good. But again, this is also arriving with 16 gig of LPDDR5 memory there. Again, not removable. It's fixed 16 gig, but at the same time, that CPU doesn't support more than 16, I believe. So that's not the end of the world. At least they've gone maximum there. And at that price point, 16 gig is actually pretty darn good to be included. It's also a 9-lane CPU. So again, the distribution of the ports and connectivity on this, well, let's get into that. First off, the individual M.2 NVMe's are downgraded to Gen 3 times 1. So although there is gigabit connectivity there, realistically you are looking at around 800 megs. The SATA connections there, less encumbered by that, but again they are SATA SSDs anyway. They were never going to get more than 400 to 500 megabytes per second cap. I will say during performance testing there, when we tested the individual SSDs, we saw performance numbers of the SSDs on their own. Again, pretty respectable numbers, exactly the sort of stats I would have expected to see of those SSDs for all the individual tests, as you can see there on screen. Externally, when we took advantage of the 10GBE connection, however, I wasn't able to fully saturate that 10G connection, as it is, according to the brand, on a 3 times 1 lane. Now, that seemed to conflict ever so slightly with what I saw when I was going through the PCIe lanes. Maybe it's a PCIe switch it's going through that bottled it down to 3.1. The result was, when I did a lot of my testing, when I did the SATA drives there, so I put the 2 SATA SSDs in a BTRFS mirrored RAID there, I only saw performance numbers of around 500 to 600 megs, which again, in a mirror, is acceptable. I reckon if I'd zeroed them together, which I don't think a lot of users are going to do for the cold archival or at least warm storage, I might have got a little higher there. And that was in both Atto and Crystal Disk. Now, when I moved over to the M.2 NVMe's, I put those in a ZFS RAID and in RAID Z there, and I saw numbers as high as 800 megs. Now, the reason for that 800 megs, according to Link Plus, again, is because it's on that 3 times 1 lane there. Again, I'm going to dig a little bit more into what I was seeing on the PCIe lanes and the controllers in between, but still that does mean that fully saturating that 10GBE is going to be incredibly difficult, but realistically, you always had more performance on the drive media inside this for the most part, but still, I would have liked to have seen full gigabit out of that, or gigabyte I should say, per second, and that 10GBE is not quite the pinnacle 10GBE I would have liked to have seen. Now, again, when I reached out to the brand on this, they are still in the process of optimization. This is a prototype. We need to treat it as such, so it might well be something that gets changed over time in feedback and with other reviewers as the final product rolls off production line. But remember, we're talking about a prototype, but I still want to evaluate it as such. Now, I want to talk about the software, because unlike when the previous generation N1 came out, things have changed over at Unraid. Now, it's mostly good news with a little bit of complex understanding to be had. When you get the device, it doesn't actually come with the Unraid license activated right out the box, if that is the way this is going to arrive for crowdfunding. What you get is this. You get a card that has instructions of activating the Unraid license. This arrives with an Unraid, I believe, version 6 on board, that they're currently in version 7 that you can upgrade to without even registering. You don't even need to do much. You can just sign up for a 30-day trial and upgrade this to the latest version if you choose. But this card arrives with a little scratch card there at the bottom, and underneath there is your serial number, and that gives you a 1-year Unraid license. Again, Unraid have changed a lot of their licensing policy and the tiers of it, but that that Unraid license, which retails at $49 currently, will give you the system and all 6 drives and full access to Unraid's entire platform there, all of the updates, both feature and security. Now, at the end of that year, you've got a choice. You don't have to do anything if you don't want to. If at the end of that year, if you don't renew your license, if you don't upgrade to another year, you don't upgrade to a lifetime license, again, that's like $250, but I think there is a saving. If you've already got a 1 year, you can get it at a discount. But if you don't do any extra stuff there, here's what happens. You don't get access to feature updates, but you do still get access to all of the security updates for your version. So case in point, let's say you were running Unraid 7.0.1. So that's 7.0.1. And at the end of that year, if that was the version you are on, you can get every single update at 7.0. whatever until Unraid stops supporting 7.0. Even when they're going to 7.1, they're going to keep supporting 7.0 with security updates and some feature updates. But once they get to 7.2 or 7.3, they may well, that version, make it EOL. So it won't end at that year. You'll still get a lot of security updates there and still the flexibility to upgrade to a new license if you choose. And moreover from that, you can still use any third-party NAS operating system you want to use on this anyway. The USB that's inside, use it, format it, do what you want, but just keep in mind to register that license first. And as mentioned earlier, you get a 30-day trial. If this is still the case when this rolls out at the end of crowdfunding, I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend you ride out most of that trial, because if you do that, you'll ensure that when you apply this license, you enjoy an extra month completely for free, and then you get to the end of this. But just make sure that maybe 1 or 2 days before the end of this license, upgrade fully to the latest version of Unraid, because you will be covered up until the most recent version and revision of Unraid at the end of this year. Now, I could review Unraid in this. I could talk about, give this all the kudos of Unraid, but I don't think that's fair. I think this is very well put together, and I love that this is a turnkey Unraid solution, but I'm reluctant to bestow all of the benefits and all of the praise that I give to Unraid directly on it. Do I think it's a great platform? Yes. Do I think it's a flexible platform? Yes. Do I think it's user-friendly as a DIY platform? Mostly. Do I think it's a capable platform? Yes. Do I think it is flexible, customizable, and able to support most users? For the most part, yes. And the fact that this is a gateway to that is a great thing. But we are looking at the device, and the device itself, I do like the device. I think the 10GBE has left me, and the performance as well externally, has left me a little underwhelmed. And as long as they maintain the existing price point of the N1, I'm happy, because this versus the original N1, I would prefer the new one. It's got a better network connectivity over than 2.5G this arrived with. It's got a better CPU than the N5105 this arrived with. It has better capabilities and better design and cooling and active airflow. Indeed, as we've mentioned in other videos, thanks again to HIC Micro for supplying us with a thermal camera here that we were able to look at this system when it was undergoing access on all drives. And when we looked at the temperature of it, when we did the thermal imaging, it was great. We saw some very, very respectable low numbers. So clearly they've listened to both the criticism and the feedback of other users on the temperature of the N1. So I was really happy there. Ultimately, for crowdfunding, I like it. If you are happy with going with the crowdfunding product, again, the link will hopefully be in the description. If not now, then very, very soon. If you're unsure about that, and the way this is right now, if this device arrived at retail tomorrow, proper Amazon, proper any eShop of your choosing, and it arrived at $400, given it includes Unraid as well, and 10GBE, I like it, and I would recommend it based on that. But as for crowdfunding, it's still a prototype, and be aware. Apart from that, I like what I'm seeing, and I want to see Link Plus keep moving forward. If it's not already live, the Link Plus S1 4-bay NAS solution that they're also working on, That left me pretty impressed. So do check out that video if it's not already live. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. There'll be links in the description to all of the products I've talked about today and others. So if you found this video helpful, and if you were going to go to those stores anyway, make sure those things are true, please use those links. We get a small commission and it allows us to keep doing what we do. Me and Eddie is just us. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.